topic tonight. Today we're going to focus on enabling in the context of having our loved ones who are struggling with addiction of any kind of sort. Though this information will not be exclusively useful to that, you're going to be able to apply it to all different places, but we're going to look at it within this context tonight. So, who am I? I'm Olivia. I am a therapist here at Shift. I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying as well as a Canadian certified addictions counselor. So I work here at Shift as a therapist who specializes in helping people and their families overcome addiction. My intention this evening is to help you learn to support yourself through your loved one's addiction. We're going to talk about a few different things tonight. So first being, we're going to start off with some icebreakers as always, just a couple of those to get us started. And then we're going to focus on understanding the enabling cycle. What is enabling? Give you some examples. We're going to talk about how can we break this cycle of enabling then if we are an enabler, if there's some enabling tendencies, how can we break through that and give you some strategies that you can put in place. We're going to talk about some resources that are available to you as the loved one. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for some question and answer and all of that. All right. So first off, we're going to start with a couple of icebreakers here. So you're welcome to unmute and share. You're welcome just to throw your answers in the chat. Whatever works for you works for me. So we're going to start off with these lovely little sheeps. And I want to know, how are you feeling today? How's your day been on a scale of 1 to 9 of these sheeps? Which sheep feels the most like how you've been feeling today? As I said, you can throw it in the chat, you can unmute. Let me know how you're feeling. I feel like I'm like a 2 today. Thursday is my Friday, so I don't have to work tomorrow, but I also don't really have any plans tomorrow. So like, I'm not a 9 because I really don't know what I'm doing tomorrow yet, but you know, it's good. I'm a 2. We've got a 4 in the chat. Anyone else?
I'd say I'm a 3.
3, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. A little woolly-eyed today. That's okay. Awesome. All right. All right, yeah, some 3s, some 4s, perfect. Okay, so in the chat, I'm wondering, in one word, how would you describe how you feel about being here today? I know there's usually lots of feelings about coming in and talking about a topic like we are today. You might be feeling a little nervous, a little intrigued, a little anxious, a little excited. Yeah, you can just throw it into the chat, see how we're feeling today. Curious. We've got some curious. I'm feeling excited to have you guys here today. So yeah, that's awesome. Proud, yeah. We're taking some control back to ourselves. We're proud of ourselves for showing up today. I'm proud of all of you for showing up today. Absolutely. All right. Now, this next one is an only if you're comfortable. If you are comfortable, I'm curious to know who you have been supporting in your life. You know, there's so many of us that support different people who've been struggling with addiction in our lives. It might be a partner, it might be a child, a sibling, a friend, any of that for sure. Absolutely. I'll share with you guys, I've spent time over my lifetime supporting different types of people, friends, life partners, and family members, all kinds of different people with addiction in my life here and there. Absolutely. All right. So thank you for breaking the ice with me. I know that it can be a little anxiety inducing to be here, and absolutely are welcome to kind of sit back and listen if that's where you're at today. No problem. So let's talk about understanding enabling a little bit. So through these next couple of sections, I'm going to throw some information at you. I know it may feel like a lot of information at once. So we're going to go through it. You can hold your questions till the end of each section, and then we can kind of break some things down there if we need to. There's some opportunity for discussion here, but again, it can just be in the chat. We can talk about it together. Whatever works for you works for me. So enabling is a family response to addiction, and it's a very common response to addiction. As we as families and friends become involved in a person's life who's struggling with an addiction, enabling is a behavior pattern that often will develop. It's when a person reacts to our loved ones' behaviors in a way that actually shields them from the impact of the consequences of their behavior. This might be done by protecting, covering up. We might make excuses or take responsibility for things that aren't our responsibility. We might lie, deny, avoid. All of those types of things are all involved in enabling. It's done out of a sincere desire to help and usually out of love, but it just doesn't work the way that we want it to. One reason why we enable our loved ones is because of a concept that we call parallel processes. And parallel processes means that as our loved one adapts to life in addiction, we also go through an adaptation process. So, for example, things that were really shocking at the beginning of this might not be quite so shocking anymore. A call from the police station, getting dropped off. At first, that first time it happens, it's like, what in the heck is going on? What? This is so out of the norm. But then as time goes on, just like our loved one develops tolerance to their substance, needing more and more alcohol to get the same effect, it happens in our lives too. So that 10th time that we get a call from the police station, okay, it's just another Wednesday night now. And we go and we do what we feel like we need to do. It might look like us becoming more and more focused on their behaviors. Their emotions are now predicted by their substance, whether or not they have been getting their substance or engaging in their behavior, like gambling. Their emotions will start to be in response to that. What happens with us then is our emotions are often predicted by theirs. So it's kind of this chain reaction down. The drug determines their emotion determines our emotion, and we all just get tangled up together. So let's break it down a little bit more, and let's talk about the different types of enabling behaviors. There's quite a few. So we'll go through, I'll try and pace myself, but if I'm going too fast, please feel free to let me know. So rationalizing and accepting. This is any attempt we make to normalize or explain away the symptoms of addiction. So we might hear ourselves saying things like, everybody lets loose sometimes, or it's just a phase, maybe during university, everybody parties, or it's those new friends that they've been spending time with, they're influencing them. Avoiding and shielding. So protecting our loved ones from the real consequences of their addiction. So hiding problems from them so that we can avoid confrontation. You know, maybe bills haven't been paid, but we're just gonna, deal with it so that we don't have to deal with the fight. Hiding problems from other people, outside of our family, perhaps, just to keep up those appearances. Like, make sure everything outside facing looks good. It doesn't matter how much chaos is actually happening on the inside. We might make excuses for them as to maybe why they can't attend an event. Maybe they've drank too much the night before, now they're hungover and they can't quite make it. And we have to come up with some sort of excuse that feels acceptable for why they're not there. And we might rescue them from their problems. So again, if we kind of come back to that, the bills thing, we are hiding it from them, but we're also, maybe paying their phone bill when they're not even realizing it, that phone could get cut off just because you decide not to pay that bill for them that time. Attempting to control. So any action that attempts to take control of their behavior, threatening to leave, but not following through. Sending other people to babysit or check in on them to make sure everything's okay, or to keep them accountable to a promise maybe they've made. Throwing out substances, a lot of the times, we'll think, I just pour it all out, and then they don't have anything to drink. But that doesn't really matter. It might actually just send them on this cycle of seeking more. Bribing, if you don't drink, I will buy you this thing, or I will withhold sex if you do drink tonight. Any of those types of things, or possessions, all different things that we can use to try and take control. Taking over responsibilities. So arranging or making treatment decisions on their behalf, doing all the intake paperwork for a residential treatment center, all of that, taking over household responsibilities, making appointments, or even sometimes appearing in court or things like that on their behalf, and being the middleman with children. So if there's kids in the house, we might try to protect the kids from what's going on, but we're also keeping that loved one from seeing the full impact of what's going on. Cooperating and collaborating. This is one that we often really think of when we think of enabling. We think of the things that are actively assisting them in using. And that's why a lot of us might have said, I'm not an enabler, I don't enable them, because this is what we're thinking of, or we're thinking of trying to take control of things. All of those other pieces, we don't usually think about, or we don't realize that they are enabling until we come to something like this. So cooperating, collaborating, behaviors that actively assist them in using, loaning money, joining in use, not reporting impaired driving, and not honestly sharing the impact of their addiction on you. Rescuing and subserving. So again, we commonly think of these things when we think of enabling. So this is, really looking after or overprotecting our loved one. Maybe we're keeping their use a secret from other loved ones, from their parents even. We might encourage them just use at home, just drink at home. We don't drink when we go out, but just drink at home. That's okay. We might wait on them. We might hold up dinner waiting for them to come home, or we might lose out on our own sleep waiting for them to come home. And sometimes they don't always. And isolating ourselves from friends and family. This might be consciously, this might be totally subconsciously, that we just find ourselves just sucking further and further out of that social life that we do have. So I just threw a ton of information at you. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to read through something called the butterfly parable. I'm going to read through it. As I read through it, I just kind of want you to think about how have you seen enabling showing up in your life? So I will read. A man found a cocoon of a butterfly. One day, a small opening appeared. He sat and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to squeeze its body through the tiny hole. Then it stopped as if it couldn't go further. So the man decided to help the butterfly. He took a pair of scissors and snipped off bits of the remaining cocoon. The butterfly emerged easily, but it had a swollen body and shriveled wings. The man continued to watch it, expecting that at any minute the wings would enlarge and expand enough to support the body. Neither happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of its life crawling around. It was never able to fly. What the man, in his kindness and haste, did not understand was that the restricting cocoon and the struggle required by the butterfly to get through the opening was nature's way of forcing the fluid from the body into the wings so that we were ready for flight once that was achieved. Sometimes struggles are exactly what we need in our lives. Going through life with no obstacles would cripple us. We will not be as strong as we could have been, and we would never fly. So I ask you, again, you can unmute, you can throw it in the chat, you can just think and reflect on it yourself. How has enabling shown up in your life? One way that I know that enabling has shown up in my life, me as an enabler, not reporting impaired driving. It's something that we probably would never do, or maybe we did when we were younger and we've learned and we would never do that again. But it's really damn hard to call on your loved one. Really hard. So that's one way that I used to just let it go. We might make excuses for our loved ones. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Anything else that comes to mind for anybody? All right. Well, I'll let you reflect on your own, and we can move on to the next piece. So now we're all sitting here, and yeah, not telling loved ones close to us really stood out for sure. Absolutely. Not telling our other loved ones what's going on, not telling our loved one that's in the addiction how it's actually impacting us. Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about how we've seen it show up. We've talked about how it can show up in our lives. Now you're probably sitting here going, how do we fix that then? So let's talk about that. Let's give you some resources. That's what I'm all about. I want you to take something with you. So let's break the enabling cycle. The opposite of enabling is detaching. So detaching is the ability to live your own life rather than a life centered around your loved one's addiction. So we've become parallel processes. We're all doing the same things all at once. Now we need to turn off, take our own road. Detaching is being able to separate yourself from the problem while continuing to love the person, because the person is not the problem. The problem is not necessarily the person, but this person is dealing with a problem right now. This is a healthy response to addiction. It's the process of emotionally distancing ourselves from a loved one and creating healthy space for the relationship. We're going to hand back the reins that we never actually really held. We thought we did, but we weren't actually doing anything with them. We're going to hand those back to our loved one, and we're going to remove ourselves from the assumed responsibilities for their choices. It's about having an awareness that you cannot control someone else's actions. We've probably tried to do that for a long time, and it hasn't been working. So we need to try something else now. We can only control how we react to other people's choices. So this idea of detachment can feel cold when we first start learning about it. We feel like maybe we're giving up on them in some way. but I promise you that is not the case. Detaching with love is what we're aiming for. And it can be an incredibly positive thing for both you and your loved one. By taking a step back, we can remove the shame that they might feel from disappointing you. Their future recovery will stem from their own choice to be healthy rather than the pressure from you. And it will give them the power to accomplish milestones for themselves and feel satisfaction of meeting their own goals. Most of all, detaching actually communicates the message that you believe that they're strong enough, capable enough, and brave enough to recover for themselves, that they do have the ability to do this. They don't need to be rescued or saved by somebody else outside of themselves, that they actually have all of this within them. So, 5 C's to help you remember what detaching is about. So first off, you did not cause this problem. You didn't. It might feel like you did. You might be questioning, did I make them do this? Do I make them drink? No, you don't. You did not cause that problem. The second is you cannot control the behavior of other people. It's not your responsibility, but you can control your own behavior and how you respond to their actions. We can't cure this problem. None of us have the ability to swoop in and cure it. So we don't need to try and cure it, but we can cope and we do have choices. Here's some tips. Tips on how to detach. So first off, doing exactly what you're doing today. Learning about addiction and recovery, learning about this process is going to be so important. We want to focus on effective communication strategies, and we'll talk about that again in a minute here. But yeah, focusing on those effective communication strategies. I highly recommend finding a support group, a peer support group of other people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. That's part of today, that you guys are not alone in this. There are other people that are going through the same thing. Look after yourself. You've spent so much time centering your life around this loved one's addiction that you likely have started to neglect your own needs for self-care, for socialization, for all of these other healthy behaviors. We want to be assertive and enforce our established consequences. Not only do we want to make sure that we're reinforcing consequences, we also want to reinforce positive change. So when we do see those pieces that are positive within them, we want to encourage that. We want to reward them, celebrate their accomplishments. If we hit 7 days with no drinks, let's celebrate it in some way that does not involve alcohol. Maybe, it's summer, and anybody that knows me is that I'm always looking for an excuse to go get ice cream. And celebrating your loved one with ice cream is always a great choice. Learn to cope with your own unpleasant feelings. That might look like going to therapy yourself. A lot of the times we're focusing on our loved ones and they need help and they need support and you need to go to therapy or you need to go to rehab, residential treatment. But you also can learn to cope with your own unpleasant feelings and get the support that you deserve as well. Allow your loved ones to make their own decisions. This one's really, really hard, but it's really necessary. understand that this process takes time and that relapse and lapse are a part of recovery. They will likely happen, and it's not the end of the world. We will move on from it. And ensure to take time to build your own network of support. That might include your own therapist. That might include your peer support group. That might include other family members and friends. It might include your own doctor. Whatever that looks like for you, build that network of support, because it's important for everybody within this, your loved one and yourself. Boundaries. How many times do we hear the word boundaries right now? I scroll through TikTok and I swear it's all I see. Boundaries, 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 boundaries. Okay, but what's actually a boundary? What is a boundary then? So boundaries are limits that we set which tell ourselves what behavior we will or we will not accept in our lives. I've been using this concept of internal consent to describe boundaries, but I actually was reading a post by our CEO, Megan, yesterday, and I thought that she really explained it so well. And so, full disclosure, I'm stealing this from her and I will take this for a while. So, boundaries are internal facing, they are the limits that we set for ourselves in what we will consent to taking into our life. A limit is an external facing limit that we're giving to other people. So I will not accept X, Y, and Z. If this happens, I will follow up with this consequence. Boundaries are internal facing. So it's, I am not comfortable with, speaking to my loved one in this way, whatever that looks like. Remembering you're the one responsible for enforcing the consequences of your boundaries. Decide which boundaries are non-negotiable. Violence is, I'm going to encourage all of you, violence is non-negotiable. Communicate these things clearly. It might also look like loaning money. That's non-negotiable. I'm not giving you anything. Or, if you are driving impaired, it is non-negotiable that I will be calling and letting somebody know. Whatever those boundaries are for you, you get to decide them, but communicate that clearly. Again, communicate those consequences clearly. Are we seeing a theme here? Consequences and being clear. Finally, we want to speak in I messages when our boundaries have been crossed. So this is what I was saying about that effective communication. An I message is an effective form of communication which lets other people know how you feel about something they have done. It states your feelings about an event and how their behavior affects you. So we start off with when. We briefly identify the offensive behavior. Then we go with I feel. We want to state a feeling in one word. And then we explain because. A short statement explaining why you feel this way. So it might look like, when you come home late, I feel anxious because I don't know if you're okay. Any questions about the iMessage piece? I know it's very quick to go through. Cool. So my question to you guys then is, why is self-care important in this? And what does your self-care look like? You take a minute, think, again, throw it in the chat, unmute yourself and share, whatever works for you. Yeah, sometimes we just need to sit in silence, be still. A lot of the times when we are going through what we are going through right now, we are used to living in chaos. Chaos is our norm. There's all shit is always hitting the fan. And so to actually get to sit and be still may be uncomfortable, but it can be really good for us too. Self-care might look like going to a peer support meeting. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go up. I think excellent, Stefania. Boundaries are a crucial element of self-care. Absolutely. Um, Sometimes that might just look like, you know what? Doing a night out with some friends for yourself. Maybe it's just getting to go out and get your favorite drink from Starbucks or Tim's or wherever that looks like if you can. Um, but also, yeah, sharing with our loved ones about how we're feeling, our loved ones outside of this addiction and our loved ones inside of this addiction. Healthy boundaries do create healthy relationships. Awesome. All right. Shall we talk resources? I think we shall. So, there's all kinds of resources available out there. We will go through all of these ones. And then I have some recommended reading for you as well. So starting us off for resources, first one is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, or you may have heard it referred to as CAMH. It is based in Toronto. So if you are in the Toronto area, they have a family resource center that you can physically walk into and get resources. Whether or not your loved one is in treatment at CAMH doesn't matter. They're happy to support you regardless. They also have some online courses that are fairly short, like you can do them in like 1 to 2 sittings usually, to help us with that education piece that we've been talking about learning about addiction and recovery. So they have one called Addiction 101, and they also have one called Empowering Families Affected by Substance Use. They're free, they're online, they're super accessible. The Canadian Mental Health Association, or CMHA, has branches all across Canada. Many of the CMHA branches host family support as well, either through peer support programs, sometimes they're family groups. I know CMHA Thames Valley, based out of Southwestern Ontario, I used to work with them. They have an excellent family group that they run if you're London based, but otherwise check out your local CMHA branch. If you don't know what it's called, feel free to visit CMHA Ontario online and they'll be able to help navigate you towards your closest CMHA. Peer support programs. So a lot of us are familiar with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's so many different branches of that programming. So for our loved ones, there's AA, there's Narcotics Anonymous, NA, or sometimes you can go to, they used to have CA, I'm pretty sure it's still running in a lot of places, Cocaine Anonymous. They also have Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous. There is an anonymous group for everybody, I promise. But that also means that there are groups for you guys. So that is anything that ends with anon is your family support. So Al-Anon, alcoholics, Nar-Anon, narcotics, any drug that is not alcohol, Gam-Anon for gambling, all kinds of things. There's also sometimes you'll see things end with a teen. Those are for youth. So alateen or narateen, those are for youth and children affected by somebody's substance use as well. Smart Recovery Family and Friends. Smart Recovery is an excellent peer support program as well. It's a little bit different. So if you know anything about the history of AA, it started as a Christian-based group, but it has very much moved away from that these days over the years. But Smart Recovery was kind of born out of that, in that some people were looking for something that was really science-based. So they still talk about spirituality and its importance in recovery, but it really looks at some pillars that are very based in science. They have meetings, as I said, for family and friends, as well as for people who are struggling with addiction themselves. The Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction is online, and they have so many different resources. If you would just like to learn more about substances in particular, they have some great family resources on there as well. It's a really great wealth of knowledge that you can find on their website. Finally, there's Connects Ontario and the Canada Drug Rehab Addiction Services Directory. So these two are directories for addiction treatment and support across Ontario and Canada. So a lot of times you can go in, say what you're looking for, and this can help you assist your loved one in making their own decision on where they would like to attend treatment or what resources are available in your area, as well as for yourself. I listed Connects Ontario because I'm Ontario based and I know it really well, but I imagine that there are provincial directories in other provinces as well, but there's always the Canada-wide one. Recommended reading. So I've got 4 books here that I think are really great for ourselves when we're supporting our loved ones. So the first one is Addict in the House, a no-nonsense family guide through addiction and recovery by Robin Barnett. The second one is Addict in the Family, Support Through Loss, Hope, and Recovery by Beverly Conyers. So these two are ones that I often recommend out to other people. They've been recommended to me by other addiction counselors and therapists. I will take a note about the title here. In the world of person-first language, a lot of the times we don't really use the term addict anymore to describe our loved ones, but really it's up to them. I'll let you guys decide how you feel about that. The next two are ones that I have personal connections with. So Gabor Mate, this is a book I really, really love. I have it in its slightly different cover. But Gabor Mate, if you are not familiar with him, is a doctor based out of Vancouver. He's spent a lot of time working with people who have addiction concerns in the medical field and all of that. So in his book, he goes through a lot of really great stories of people that he worked with who had addictions themselves. He talks about why we as humans are prone to addiction, as well as some strategies and such for dealing with cravings and those types of things. So there's a strategy in here called the 4 steps plus 1 that I use very frequently with a lot of my addiction clients, but really great book. The other one is One Good Reason. If you like Great Big Sea, you may recognize a familiar face here with Sean McCann. I got to hear him and his wife, Andrea, speak about this book at a recovery breakfast last year, and it was absolutely incredible. So their book, One Good Reason, they wrote it together, and it's really a memoir about their journey with Sean's addiction. And so what they do is they tell the story from both sides. So through Sean's eyes as the person who is actively struggling with addiction, and then through his wife's eyes as the person supporting as well. Really great read. I would definitely recommend it. So again, I just threw a ton of information at you. Let's sit in some questions. We've got lots of time. This is the end of all of the information that I wanted to give you guys today. So I wanted to just leave some time here so that we can talk about anything that you guys had questions about, if you're looking for clarification, if there was anything in particular that you were hoping to get support on today. Again, throw it in the chat